Everybody, Brandon with Task Force Pest Control again. So, it is debunk day. It is time to find out whether or not termite bait stations work. Yes. End of video. No, but seriously. This debate has went on for as long as termite bait stations have existed, since the 80s. And everyone I talk to about termites, they want to know a definitive answer. What's the best thing to go with, liquid versus the stations? Do I want to use a liquid? Do I want something that is going to be put into the ground? It's going to have like a 10 to 20 year warranty on it. It's going to last in the ground for 10 to 20 years, and I will never have to worry about termites for as long as that warranty's there. Or do I go with a bait system that goes in the ground, I renew on a yearly basis, and it's supposed to keep them away for as long as it's in the ground? That answer totally depends on your situation. So, I am not anti-station. As a matter of fact, I'm pro-bait station, depending on the bait station. I don't like monitoring stations. I don't like the stations that you put in the ground. They have the little cedar stick that you stick into them, and someone has to come out and check them every month, every 6 months, every year, whatever the company standard is. I hate those stations. And I hate them because they're not doing anything except monitoring. So, for clarification, there is only one bait station, one termite bait station out there right now in the market that's been out there for a while that actively controls termites, and that's Centricon. So, if anyone looks it up, Centricon, the little green stations, they go flat to the ground, they're perfectly circular, it has Centricon written on the lid. Those stations are highly recommended. They definitely work. It's been tested and proven time and time again. They are the penultimate when it comes to termite bait stations. And they work so well because their baiting stick, the cellulose baiting stick that they use to monitor, is also made of an IGR, pneumoflumeron. So what pneumoflumeron, or an IGR in specific, is, an IGR essentially replaces certain hormones in certain insects. So for example, pneumoflumeron is designed for termites specifically. It's designed to prevent them from being able to molt. All insects can only get bigger by shedding their old shell or old exoskeleton and growing a new one, or the one underneath it hardens into a new one. What pneumoflumeron does is it prevents them from being able to shed their old shell. There are a couple different going theories as to what happens during this particular moment in time. You have two camps. You have the one that says that they keep growing until they smash themselves inside their own shell. Not very likely. And then you have the camp that says what happens is because they can't molt, they can't reach sexual maturity, and it eliminates the entire colony because it essentially sterilizes the colony. That's usually the winning answer. So, Centricon stations have the ability to eliminate an entire colony just from one station. And usually what we do, Centricon requires you put one every 20 feet. Most companies put one every 10 feet, myself included. Task Force Pest Control, we put one every 10 feet if we can. If we absolutely have to stretch it to 20, we will. Some places, like if you have a driveway, sometimes that driveway is about 20 feet across, so we can kind of get away with one on one side, one on the other side. Most of the time, if I can get away with it, though, I'll put a station in the middle. It's not always beneficial because usually once you run over it, the weight of a car will either push it so far into the ground that you can't get it out again, or it's in a position where it just gets covered over by asphalt. Somebody asphalts the road, or it gets covered by gravel over time. If they snowplow or something, it's hard to find that station after that point. You always got to put a new one in. So when I put the stations in, I put them in with the idea in mind of I'm going to have to find these next year. So I really, really need them to be in a very specific location. With that in mind, the cost of Centricon stations is usually cheaper than a liquid treatment. on average, again, Centricon is really weird. So they charge the pest control company for each time a station is put in the ground. They don't charge to sell the company the stations. So if I buy or I get an order of 100,000 stations from them, they won't charge me for that. They charge me the moment I say, "Hey, I put 20 in Bill's yard." They'll be like, "Okay, we're charging you for those 20 stations." That's kind of how that works. With that in mind, the area could be a different cost. If you're in a low income area or an area that doesn't have a whole lot of pest issues, the cost to put 20 stations on your yard might be different than the cost to put 20 stations on even your neighbor's yard, depending on the region. And it really does go from region or from area to area like that. I've seen that happen, where one neighbor paid, $2,000 to have stations installed, and the other neighbor only paid like $700-800. And there's so many factors that go into that I can't give you specific details on what those differences could be, or at least what those differences were. But I could at least speculate on what they could be. If you have a cistern or a well or anything like that nearby, they don't affect water supply. You don't have to worry about contaminating water sources with these. Pneumofluoron does not affect humans or animals in any way, shape, or form except for insects that molt. They have to have that specific DNA sequence in order for pneumofluoron to affect them. So it's not something that even a lot of salesmen I know who sell it will take the bait station out and they'll put it right on their tongue to show you that it's safe. It really is something that cannot affect you, your dogs, your cats, your kids, anything. So when it comes to price differences between this neighbor and that neighbor, it could be this neighbor's house required 20 stations, this neighbor's house only took 17. This person's house, they had all these different things we had to account for, like they had spaces where we had to go farther in between stations or closer in between stations. This neighbor didn't. This neighbor's house has a record of getting termites, this neighbor doesn't. So when you pay for the stations, you're not just paying a flat rate for the stations and the rate to have them installed. You're also paying for 2 separate warranties depending on what kind of base stations you get. Most of the time, the company that puts the stations in is going to give you a small warranty. That warranty is essentially, we will come out and treat without charging you, or we'll charge you this specific set rate if you ever get termites while these stations are in and while we have an active account with you. And the secondary warranty comes from the manufacturer themselves, like Centricon. Usually they'll put a warranty on it and say, if you get termites, we'll pay for the damage. Those are subject to change. It's different from company to company, so make sure you kind of read over the terms and conditions before you sign anything and get anything set up. Get multiple quotes if you need to. With that in mind, do I prefer the bait stations? Yes, 100%. When it comes to the liquid treatment, there is so much that has to go into doing a liquid termite treatment. We have to dig a trench around the entire structure of whatever we're treating. It has to be about 6 inches deep. We then have to rod and inject about, I think it's, depending on where you're at, it's about 2 gallons per foot. So we have to put a hole in the ground, stick an injector rod in that goes about 2 feet into the ground, hold the trigger as it's pumping 2 gallons into the ground, which usually you can only do at a certain rate. You can't just adjust the pump to shoot 2 gallons in a second, because it'll spill out of the hole, and you got to do it for however long it takes the ground to percolate that insecticide back into the ground. So it usually takes about a minute, sitting there for 60 seconds holding that trigger, counting to 60, pulling out, going to the next hole. And what really sucks is almost every time you have to drill, because they're going to have a concrete foundation, they're going to have an asphalt driveway, something. They're going to have a pooled porch. You have to go as close to the foundation as you can. You can't just go around the porch. You have to drill through the porch and inject it directly into the ground at the foundation. If they have a crawl space, you have to get into the crawl space and soak all of the footers of the crawl space down with that termiticide as well. And depending on the situation, you have to drill through the blocks and put it into the blocks from underneath too. So it gets ridiculous when it comes to treating with a liquid treatment. You're looking at hours. On average, the average home is about 170 linear feet. So you're looking at 170 holes that you have to rod and inject. It's a lot. A house like that is like 340 gallons of termiticide that you have to put in the ground. It's ridiculous how it's expansive and intensive it is. You have to put in your report if there's a cistern or a well or anything like that, and that's on the property within a certain amount of feet, you can't treat. And then you have to fill out a report as to why you have to do the entire treatment, why you only did a partial treatment. Those are also really annoying. And then if you run into a situation like that, you can't give them a full warranty because you didn't treat the full place. So it's like, yeah, I know you just paid me $4,000 to do your termite treatment, but we weren't able to do this section of the house, therefore we're going to give you a partial warranty. That sucks. So you run into a lot more issues when it comes to liquid. Another thing with liquid is that it's really expensive. It really is a really expensive treatment. On average, you're looking at thousands of dollars easy. That's just basic. That's a basic normal house, normal area of treatment. $1,500 to probably $7,000 or $8,000. Sometimes I've seen them go as high as $12,000, depending on how big the place is, like an apartment complex or something like that. But it's a lot of money. The benefits, though, is that a lot of those different termiticides stay in the ground for 10 upwards of 20 years. And that's a 20-year warranty that you already have. You've already paid for. But with the stations, depending on what company it is and depending on what the stations are, you're looking at hundreds of dollars a year to renew. And essentially what renewing a contract for something like Centricon is the company will set up a certain amount of time, they'll come out and check them. Centricon only requires that we do it once a year. Some companies will do it twice a year. Some companies will do it each treatment. They come out to your general pest control and just add a certain price to your general pest control. But the warranty covers if the lids get broken, we replace the lids. If we pull out the bait in one station, the bait's broken or gone or old, we'll replace it. And we just keep coming back and replacing that bait as needed. They don't have to be monitored. They really don't have to be, checked and be like, oh, there's termites in here today. Because it really doesn't matter. If there is termites in them, the station's going to take care of it. What we're checking is the treatment. So with all of this in mind, there are imposters out there. There are stations that are just monitoring stations. When it comes to active bait, you can't really buy that as a consumer. You have to have a pesticide license. And that does kind of suck. It keeps people like me in business, though. But when it comes down to it, the other stations that you get, you monitor them. You'll check it once a month usually. And if you see termites in it, then you take out the wood bait and you put in the termiticide bait. And then hopefully they'll eat that termiticide bait, and that'll be the end of those termites. But it doesn't guarantee really anything. Those stations I highly recommend against using because there's no warranty involved. You're really on your own from the time you get them. If you see termites at a station and you put the bait matrix in there and then you check it again next month and they're still there, or they've moved from there to your house, it's all you. There's nothing there to protect you, and you just wasted hundreds of dollars on the system for nothing. So I highly recommend. There are very few insects that I will tell people that all day, every day, no matter what the situation, always call a pest control company. Termites are number one on that list. Bed bugs are right behind them. So when it comes to termites in particular, bait stations are not always a bad thing as long as they're actively baited. You don't want something that's just a monitoring system. If it's a company that uses Centricon, go for it all day long. It's going to be cheaper in the long run, and it's going to be much more effective. So with that in mind, I hope you guys learned something. I hope I helped maybe settle your mind on what kind of treatment you want to go with. I'm Brandon with Task Force Pest Control. You guys have a good day.